Greetings to you and welcome to this episode of Grace Podcast. I'm Timothy Muse. I'll be your host as we spend this time together today. It's a joy to be with you. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. I want to thank you for being courageous enough to dig into places in your life that need a little extra energy. We live in this world that tells us we're supposed to be perfect all the time. Everything, physically, mentally, emotionally, we have to be perfect. But we know that that's not true. We know that we can never achieve that. And we know that that curated image that other people are putting out there is not revealing the whole truth. But yet you're here because you know that there's places in your life that need some extra energy. You're looking at that. You're questioning it. Maybe you're doing the hard work already. Maybe you're thinking about doing the hard work. Wherever you are, thank you for being here. Thank you for being on this journey. And thank you for allowing me to come alongside you and be part of this journey with you. If this podcast is helpful, please share it out there. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you follow me or the life coaching on any one of those feeds, then you're going to see these episodes. Share them out there. Tag me in it. I'd love to see where you are. If you're in one of the listening platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, then follow us, give us a rating and review. Every positive rating and review tells the platform people are listening, and you'll get notification when a new episode comes out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, as always, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. I would love to hear from you. I truly would. GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. So we've been on this journey about social media and how social media impacts us, how these platforms and this technology impacts us. And we've looked at some really important things. Today, I want to talk about mental health. Protecting your peace, social media, mental health, and emotional well-being. That's where I want to go. I think most people have experienced this. You pick up your phone for a few minutes, you start scrolling, and somewhere along the way, your mood changes. Maybe you become anxious, maybe discouraged, maybe angry, maybe overwhelmed, maybe exhausted, maybe it's restlessness. And you don't even know what happened. You just know that you don't feel as good as you did 20 minutes ago. All right? The truth is that social media doesn't just affect what we think, it affects how we feel. It affects our emotional energy, our stress levels, our anxiety, our sense of hope, our ability to rest, and perhaps most importantly, our ability to find peace. Now, I want to be clear. I've said this before, and it's really important for me to say it over and over. Social media itself is not the enemy. It's a tool. Like a hammer, it's a tool. It can educate, it can connect, it can encourage, it can inspire, it can support, it can build community. But without healthy boundaries, it can also become a source of emotional overload. So today we're going to talk about that. Why social media affects our mental health. The psychology of emotional and mental overload, anxiety and constant connectivity, doom scrolling and negative cycles, sleep disruption and burnout, emotional boundaries, and practical ways to protect your peace. That's our path for today. That's where I want to go today. So let's start with something really simple. Human beings evolved in relatively small communities, all right? For most of history, people worried about family, local events, nearby relationships, and immediate challenges. That is how humanity has evolved throughout many, many millennia. And that is how our brain has evolved and learned to respond. But today, within 5 minutes of scrolling, you can encounter a natural disaster, a political controversy, a celebrity scandal, an emotional or economic crisis, a global conflict, a friend's vacation, someone's success, someone's tragedy, dozens of advertisements, and hundreds of opinions. Your brain is attempting to process all of that constantly, every day. The human mind was never designed to absorb this much information this quickly. And while information can be valuable, of course it can, excessive information often becomes emotional overload. Many people aren't overwhelmed because they're weak. They're overwhelmed because they're overloaded. There's a difference. When we get overwhelmed, it's not usually because we're weak or unable to handle it. It's because we're overloaded. It's because the load we're trying to carry emotionally, information-wise, experience-wise, is more than we are built to carry. Okay, because we were never trained to do that. Our evolution, our mindset, our relational reality never grew into that. It was just foisted in there pretty much overnight. I mean, I live in my own reality. I remember a time without the internet. I remember a time without, the social media platforms. Again, and I'm not, deriding the social media platforms. Again, they're a tool. They're wonderful tools. But I remember that. So in one generation, we've gone from having no access to having the access that we have. Now, our brains don't evolve that quickly. Our brains don't adjust that quickly. So we're still living with one set of reality while we're trying to dwell in another one. That's where overload comes in, because our brains were never meant to deal with that. Think about your typical scrolling session. In a matter of minutes, you might experience amusement, outrage, sadness, inspiration, fear, curiosity, jealousy, excitement, frustration, hope, one emotion after another. Okay? One emotion after another. And it becomes emotionally exhausting because of the rapidly shifting emotional states. One emotion after another, over and over, without pause, without process, without recovery. Okay? Our brains are not meant to do that. Our lives are not meant to do that. It is exhausting. I mean, think about it. Imagine if someone walked into your room every 30 seconds and gave you completely different emotional news. Okay? Every 30 seconds. This great thing happened. This terrible thing happened. This great thing happened. This terrible thing happened. This fearful thing happened. This wonderful thing happened, over and over and over again. You'd be exhausted. You would be exhausted. You'd close your door and lock it and hope that they didn't come back for a week, because your brain is trying to process all of these things over and over. That's essentially what social media does so often. The emotional switching is constant. It is a constant emotional switch from one post to the next, from one reel to the next. You can go from a great quote or a great picture to a terrible thing, to a great thing, to a terrible thing, over and over and over again. And eventually, your nervous system begins feeling overwhelmed. This is one reason many people finish scrolling feeling strangely tired. Not physically tired, but emotionally tired, because they're just on this roller coaster of emotion, up and down, up and down, up and down, over and over and over. And it just happens in rapid succession. I think the average time that someone is on a post is like 3 seconds or 4 seconds. There's a reason why reels are less than 10 seconds, because if it's over 10 seconds, you're going to scroll past it. All right. So think about that emotional roller coaster over and over. And that's where people get so tired, exhausted. They just can't process the information, but it happens in such rapid succession. And one of the hidden pressures of social media leads to anxiety. One of the hidden pressures of social media is feeling that you must always be available. This creates a sense of anxiety. You must always know. We talked about fear of missing out before, but you must always be available. The platforms make it believe that everybody's always available, always informed, always updated, always connected. Anxiety and constant connectivity go hand in hand, my friends, because many people feel pressure to respond immediately, check notifications, stay informed, keep up with conversations, monitor news, follow trends. And in that is a constant state of alertness, a constant state of alertness. The nervous system never fully relaxes. Many people haven't truly disconnected in years. Their phones are there, beside them during meals, beside them while watching television, beside them during conversations, beside them while working, beside them in bed, beside them when they wake up. There's no separation. Even in the shower, we have phones now that are waterproof, so you can scroll or you can have TikTok feeds on while you're showering. There's almost no separation. There's no stepping aside time. And when there's no separation, there's very little recovery. The brain doesn't have time to recover and process the information. The brain needs periods of rest. It needs periods of quiet. It needs periods without stimulation. Without those periods, anxiety grows because the brain is always in reactivity mode. The brain is always in connected mode. We need those times of disconnection. We need those periods of rest. That is how we are hardwired. Rest is not something that we earn, my friends. Rest is not something that we do at the end of the day. Rest is essential, particularly from the emotionally exhausting roller coaster of social media. We need rest. We need to disconnect. We need to separate. But most people haven't disconnected in years, because when they disconnect, it feels unnerving. It feels out of balance. I feel, and I've even said it myself. You know, I was out working in the yard the other day. It's beautiful. We've had some beautiful weather here, and so I finally got a chance to get out in the yard the other day. And I needed a particular tool. I was trimming my rose bushes, so I went to got a little pair of hand clippers, and I stuck them in my pocket. And I realized I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my phone with me. I had left it in the house, and there was this immediate sense of, oh my goodness, I don't have my phone. I don't have my phone. Now I use my phone for work as well as for personal time. So it is important that I have my phone because of the nature of my work. But just that sense, that emotional response, it wasn't like, yeah, I left it inside. I'll get it later. No, it was like, oh my goodness, I don't have my phone with me. And I had to put, and I put things down. I went and got my phone. Now, I didn't engage it the entire time I was out working, which was great. Nobody needed me. But that is that disconnect. That is that emotion. Okay. Imagine what you feel like if you leave the house without your phone. How are you going to respond? Your immediate thought is, oh my gosh, I don't have my phone. That is because we haven't separated in years, truly disconnected in years. The mind needs periods of rest, periods of quiet, periods without stimulation. Because if we're just constantly stimulated, that's where anxiety grows. That's where we increase in our anxiety and continue to feel dysregulated. And our brains are hardwired for that. Look, there's one of the things that we need to understand about our brains. Our brains are wired to protect and project. All right. So we always pay attention to the negative. We always see the negative. In the whole of our experience, we always see the negative. It's called negativity bias. It's part of how we're hardwired. Negativity bias is always about seeing the negative, finding the negative in any circumstance. And what this can lead to, this negativity bias can lead to doom scrolling. I'm sure you've experienced it. You know, you start reading negative news. All right. And this is how the algorithms work. When you stop on something for a long period of time, the algorithm immediately says, this is what they're looking at. I'll give you more of it. Okay. I'll give you more of it. So you've experienced it. Something called doom scrolling. You start reading a negative news story. Then another story appears. Then another one appears. Then another one appears. 30 minutes later, you're immersed in fear, outrage, and worry. Okay, over and over and over again. Why does this happen? Partly because of what we call negative bias. Human beings naturally pay more attention to threats than opportunities. All right. Now, thousands of years ago, this helped us survive. You know, when you're looking out over the plain and you see this big empty field of grass and you see one shrub, immediately your brain's gonna be like, there's a saber-toothed tiger behind that shrub. Negativity bias. It helped us to survive. It helped us to pay attention to where threats were. And thousands of years ago, that helped us. Today, it keeps us glued to alarming headlines. It keeps us glued to alarming headlines. There's no secret as to why the news cycles constantly put up the blood and the explosions, the crashes and the police chases. We don't get stories about the woman who's got a rose garden on 4 acres. We don't get stories about kids that do community gardens to feed the hungry. No, because it doesn't attract our attention. What attracts our attention, my friends, is the negativity, the threats. Okay? We are glued to alarming headlines. Our brains are wired to notice danger, and social media platforms know this. Negative content often generates stronger engagement, and engagement keeps people scrolling. That's what the platforms want. They want you on the platforms because the more you're on the platforms, the more you see advertisement, the more you see opinions, the more that people pay to get your attention. Okay? The problem is that constant exposure to negativity affects our emotional well-being. The world begins to feel more dangerous than it actually is, more hopeless than it is, more divided, more threatening. Now, that's not an argument for ignorance. It's an argument for balance. I'm not saying disconnect and don't know. I'm saying create balance. Balance is necessary. Being informed is healthy. Being consumed by negativity is not. So I'm not saying don't scroll. But I am saying be healthy in your boundaries of scrolling. Don't get caught into that negative doom scrolling where an hour later you've just ingested all of this negativity and all of this criticism and all of this complaining and hopelessness, because you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel terrible, actually. So doom scrolling, negativity bias, those things are naturally hardwired into us. And those things are very important to understand, All right. So, when we talk about this, some of the things that come up are comparison, self-criticism, anxiety, and we've already discussed comparison in a previous episode. But comparison, when we look at it from our mental health perspective, it has a massive impact. Comparison often creates self-criticism. All right. You see someone else's success. You see someone else burn it up. You question your own progress. You see someone else's appearance. You criticize your own. You see how someone else is achieving, you feel inadequate. Over time, these small moments accumulate. And eventually, anxiety begins to whisper things like, you're behind, you're not enough, everyone else has figured it out, you'll never catch up. The problem is that these thoughts are usually based on incomplete information. You're comparing your full reality to someone else's highlight reel. We've talked about this before. Yet emotionally, it can feel very real. And repeated self-criticism can have a significant impact on confidence and emotional and mental well-being. When we criticize ourselves over and over, when we find the wrong in ourselves, when we overlook the beauty, overlook the passion, when we're just looking at where we're failing, over time, that leads to anxiety and hopelessness. It just leads to us giving up. What's the point? I'll never look like that. Well, you're not made to look like that, but you're made to be healthy. What's the point of going to a gym? I'll never have rock hard abs. No, you may never have rock hard abs, but you're going to be healthier. See, when we self-criticize, when we compare and criticize over and over and over again, it just tears down our confidence in ourselves. We don't have confidence in ourselves. And social media is a platform of comparison. It is a platform putting out there what everything else does. And there's another thing that's really important that is impacted by constant scrolling and not disconnecting, and that's sleep. I've talked a lot about sleep. Sleep is so important. Mental health and sleep are deeply connected. And social media often interferes with both. Many people end their day scrolling. They tell themselves just a few minutes. Then 45 minutes disappear. An hour disappears, sometimes more. The brain remains stimulated, emotionally engaged, mentally active, and quality rest becomes harder. It does, because your brain is still trying to process all of these things it just looked at as you're closing your eyes to go to sleep. So your body's like, I'm exhausted, let's go to sleep. And your brain's firing on all cylinders about that natural disaster and about that political issue and about that loss and about that and about that and about that. Your brain is just firing on all these cylinders while your body's trying to rest. Okay? So your sleep is poor. And poor sleep affects mood. It affects concentration. It affects emotional regulation. It affects stress management. It affects energy. It affects resilience. In other words, poor sleep makes everything harder. I have said this many times. I have never met a thing that is done better with a poor night's sleep. Never. I have never met any one thing that is done better with a poor night's sleep. All right? And social media often contributes to that cycle. The challenge isn't simply how much we scroll, it's also when we scroll. Most people are feeding their brains anxiety and outrage, comparison and stimulation immediately before trying to sleep. And they wonder why their minds won't settle down. That's why. So how do we break this? How do you protect your peace? And this is the thing. This is important. All right. Awareness without action doesn't change anything. So here's some practical ways to deal with it, because you have to protect your peace. You have to protect yourself, because the feeds and the platforms in the world's not going to protect you. You can't look to something else to protect you. You have to protect your peace. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It is not. It is essential. Okay? So one thing is to curate your environment. You are allowed to unfollow accounts that consistently create negativity. You are allowed to create an environment that protects your peace. You're required to create an environment that protects your peace, because if you don't, you're not going to protect your peace. You can't look at someone else to protect your peace for you. You have to do that work yourself. So curate your environment. Curate your feeds. If you're scrolling and you're going along and here comes this account from Negative Nelly, and Negative Nelly always has something negative to say, you know what? Delete Negative Nelly. You're not required to be there. You're not paying to be there. These accounts are free. These platforms are free. Delete that account. Curate your environment. It is actually one of the things that really helps going through this is you should delete you should delete an account every day. If you delete an account every day, by the end of the month, you've deleted 30 accounts. Now, and any account that creates constant negativity, if it's there, delete it. You don't need it. You're protecting your peace. It's your requirement to do that. No one else is going to do that for you. Set time boundaries. Social media should have limits like anything else, not because it's bad, but because your attention is valuable. Okay. So set time limits. You can set a timer on your phone. You can actually set on your phone settings where after a certain period of time or a certain amount of time, the app shuts down or the phone stops you. Okay. Set time limits, set time boundaries, create and cultivate those boundaries. You have to do that work yourself, but create the boundaries. Your attention is valuable. Social media platforms know this. They want it. You have to control it, not give it away. Create digital free zones, meals, conversations, walks, prayer times, reflection time. Protect space where your mind can rest. We've talked about this before. This is really important. We've talked about this before. Create digital free zones. Limit news consumption. Stay informed, my friends, but avoid endless exposure to negative content. And here's one of the things that you do. You choose your news outlet. And you go to that news outlet. Don't let the news outlets choose you. You choose them. You're in control here. If no one has told you this about your social media content, you're in control. Okay? You're in control. So avoid endless exposure to negative content. Information should serve you, not overwhelm you. And practice emotional awareness. This is a big thing. Pay attention to how content affects your mood. Ask yourself, how do I feel right now? Is this helping me? Or is this hurting me? What do I need? See, awareness creates choice. So you want to create that awareness. You want to practice emotional awareness when you're using these platforms. Because peace is a practice. Peace doesn't happen automatically. It must be protected, especially today. We live in a world designed to compete for our attention, our emotions, our reactions, our engagement. If you are not intentional, you'll spend your life reacting to news, reacting to notifications, reacting to algorithms, reacting to everyone else's opinions. But peace grows when you become intentional, when you slow down, when you create boundaries, when you reconnect with what matters most. Peace is not the absence of information. It is the presence of healthy priorities, and your peace is yours to protect, and it must be protected. Because if you don't protect it, someone else is going to take it. Someone else is going to take it. They're going to show up and take it as quickly as they can. They want your attention. They want your peace. They want you dysregulated. There's an old adage that says, be careful of the one who has the cure to the disease you've never heard of, because they're creating the disease just to give you the cure. So the platforms are creating the disease and giving you the cure at the same time. You must be intentional. Now, again, I'm not saying delete it. I'm not saying get rid of it. All I'm saying is be intentional about it. It is important for you to set healthy priorities to protect your peace. Okay? As we come to the conclusion of our time today, I want you to remember something. Not everything deserves access to your mind. Not everything deserves access to your attention. Not every notification deserves access. Not every argument deserves your energy. Not every headline deserves your emotional investment. Your peace is valuable. Your mental health matters. Your emotional well-being matters. And while social media can be a useful tool, it should never become the primary source of your emotional state. You deserve moments of quiet, moments of stillness, moments of rest, moments where your mind can breathe. Protect those moments. They matter more than you realize. They matter more than you realize. So here's my challenge for you coming out of this. Here's my challenge for you. And this is a very specific challenge. Very specific challenge. I challenge you to create a 1-hour digital sunset. 1 hour. 1 hour before bed. No social media. No scrolling. No news feeds. 1 hour. Use that time to read, journal, wash your face, reflect, prayer, relaxation, maybe do some stretching, whatever. 1 hour of a digital sunset. So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock, then 9 o'clock, your phone goes away. All right, 1 hour. Notice how your sleep and your mood change. I know this is going to feel really, really dysregulating for people when they start it, but I encourage you to try it. 1 hour digital sunset before you go to bed, and notice how your sleep and your mental health and your mood changes. It's not going to happen overnight, though. It might happen pretty quickly, but you will see. Track your pattern. Bring that awareness. See how your day goes. 1 hour digital sunset before you go to bed. That's my challenge for you coming out of this, because I think you will see changes very quickly, and I think you will like what you see. That's what I got for you for today, my friends. If this is helpful, please share it out there. Put it out there in your social media feeds. If you're on the listening platforms, follow us, give us a rating and review. And if you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. At Grace Life Coaching, we want you to be the best you.